Peter Egan wrote about this several years ago. He said it was something like you do a lap at the place and you feel like you have been somewhere.
When I was racing professionally, diet, fitness, health was always like super important.
Which in that part of Wisconsin is just like, well, would you like the small piece of cheese or the large piece of cheese?
Well, long story short, it was a fuel mileage race. Like Road America often turns out to be in anything. IndyCar, it's always a fuel mileage race. IMSA, it's always a fuel mileage race. Because the lap's so long that if you can save a little bit of fuel, you might be able to get another lap out of it.
I go down the hall, open up, and I walk in and go, oh, I'm not taking my shoes off. Somebody has done an oil change and a murder at the same time on the carpet in this place.
Welcome to It's Not the Car. I'm Sam Smith. I'm one of your hosts. I'm a journalist and a club racer, and I drink entirely too much coffee. Ross, who are you? Go.
Who am I? Oh,
Yes.
I'm Ross Bentley. I'm a driver coach, and I like lonely, quiet walks on the beach. No, actually around racetracks.
Who doesn't like lonely, quiet walks around beaches? Racetracks, yeah. Okay, Jeff, go.
Hi, I'm Jeff Brown. I'm a motorhome driver for my day job, and when I get there, I engineer race cars.
Do you ever engineer the motorhomes?
More often than I want. Okay. Yes.
I love how motorhomes, the big secret with motorhomes is that even the very expensive, nice ones they're all kind of built like motorhomes inside. That's a whole other subject. Today's format is something we call Sam Rambles About a Thing. And the unspoken bit at the end is, it's a thing that I love. And in this case, that thing is a place, it's a vibe, it's an experience, it's a deep distillation of this great part of America that's so thick and chunky you can feel it in your bones. And we are talking, of course, about Walmart. No, yes. We're talking about Road America, which is a racetrack. And in this case, we're going to do what we do on some of our episodes where I have a little monologue where I sit there and I drink a lot of coffee and then I ramble off the story of the whole thing in a condensed fashion that you can either skip through or listen to and double your heart rate and then, never listen to the show again because it's just kind of a lot, is what somebody told me. But that guy, he's a friend, so he's fine. I don't care. All right, to start, are you guys ready? I should start this.
Go.
A sip of coffee. Okay. Hi, I'm Sam. We make this show because we like it, but also because it keeps our young producer, Mike, off the street and away from a life of crime. If you want to help both of those things happen, you're in luck. We have this thing called Patreon. For a few bucks a month, you get to help support the show, but you also get some neat perks like monthly bonus episodes. The money we raise through Patreon helps keep this show on the air. If you like what you're getting here and want to help us keep doing it, that'd be great. If not, that's fine too. We like you anyway. You're here. We're glad. Join at patreon.com/notthecar. Back to the show. Okay, to start, we have to go back to the late 1940s because you can't talk about one of the oldest permanent racetracks in North America without talking about why it was built. And why it was built is really interesting. So it's the late 1940s. Sports car racing is just kicking back up again. There are a lot of people back from the war who did really risky things. They come home, life's kind of boring. They want to find other risky things to go do. What does that mean? Well, it means that a bunch of people who nearly died while trying to save America, freedom, the world, looked for another great way to have a great time while feeling very alive. In the late 1940s, road racing was a minor league national craze. It was very barely sanctioned by organizations like the Sports Car Club of America. And at this point, those clubs were clubs. They weren't sanctioning bodies. It turned into something else entirely. But the first one of those road races was in upstate New York in 1948. It was held in the streets of a small town called Watkins Glen. It was a massive success. Thousands of people ended up coming year after year. Now, that wasn't a singular moment because like a lot of times in America when something happens that people like, it's happening everywhere else at the same time. And in Chicago, in the Midwest, in that same period, there were a group of people from the SCCA who wanted to go do the same thing. So they started looking around the area for roads. They started looking around the area specifically for public roads they could race on because at the time, public roads were where road racing happened. They get in an airplane, they fly over Wisconsin, they look down and they find a small town called Elkhart Lake. They land, they talk to the civic leaders, they find out that a local canning plant is closed, the local economy is hurting, the locals are welcoming. They set up this weird little hairy road course on the streets in 1950. It's 3.3 miles. The next year, there's a new 6.5-mile course built. It goes through the roads outside of town. It's big. It's fast. Some of the roads are really, really dangerous because the roads in that part of the country, in that part of Wisconsin in particular, are big, long, fast highways with, I don't know, fast corners at the end sometimes really slow corners at the end. They skirt across these big land formations called moraines, these big rocky parts of land that have been kicked around by glaciers millions of years ago. They're just giant ridges. These races in Elkhart, they're held once a year in the summer of 1950, 51, and 52. And by 52, tens of thousands of people are showing up. And keep in mind, when I say races, I mean balls out, balls to the wall road racing on public roads where the spectators are standing on the sidewalk inches from the cars, protected by hay bales and maybe some bunting, and in some cases, nothing at all. They weren't encouraged to sit, and in some cases forbidden to sit because, sometimes you need to run when a car goes off the road. Except everything about that sounds dangerous, it was really, really dangerous. And in most cases in motorsport, when something is dangerous, it kind of goes on for a bit until something bad happens. And the something bad that happened here was people started dying. And they didn't necessarily die at Elkhart Lake, but they were dying in those other races around the country. Sometimes people just got a little bit hurt. But there was one particular accident. It happened in Watkins Glen, where those races were still happening on the roads. It happened in 1952, Main Street of town. Picture this small upstate New York town, buildings, sidewalks, 2-lane road. There's not much there except businesses and people and thousands of people on the sidewalk. There's an Allard, this small British thing, looks like a coffin on wheels. Somebody's dumped a Cadillac V8 into it. It's running down Main Street at 80 miles an hour. It's among some other cars. The driver gets a little out of control. He puts a rear wheel on the sidewalk. He accidentally kills a small boy. The state gets up in arms. The police get up in arms. There's a Story in Life magazine on it. All around the country, public road racing comes to an absolute halt, including in Wisconsin. The state legislature bans it. Now, the people in the SCCA, everybody there, they wanted to keep it going. They wanted to figure out a way to make this happen. And so a local civil engineer, a guy named Cliff Tufte, he was president of the Elkhart Sand and Gravel Company, the supplier of highway and railroad ballast. He owned a big parcel of land outside of town. It wasn't his, but it was the company's. He decides it's good for this. He gathers support. He gets together with the Chicago region SCCA. They finance the thing by selling stock. It costs $175. I wish it cost $175. It costs $175,000. It's 2 miles outside of town. Work begins early in spring of 1955. The track is done that fall. Like a lot of other tracks of the period, it looks like the roads that are in the area. Big, fast, ballsy, lots of elevation change. And there are trees right up next to the track, but that doesn't matter. It's amazing. It is 4 miles long and 14 corners, which means a lot of it is straight. There's near constant elevation change, something like 175 feet from the highest part to the lowest part. The front straight alone is more than 3/4 of a mile long. It is on 640 acres of ground that look like a state park. And the thing is, it is still there today. It is still controlled mostly by those stockholders, and it is one of my favorite places on earth. And I am not the only one who loves it. It hasn't really changed. The racetrack, the track itself, the circuit, looks almost identical. Roger Penske called it one of the most challenging and beautiful road courses in the world, guys. Mario Andretti said it was an icon. And I'm going to shut up now because do you like Road America?
Yeah. Well, duh. I'm like, are you waiting for somebody to say no? Yeah, no. You know, Road America.
I hate pizza
I
and
hate
sunlight.
Yeah.
No. Why?
No, it's one of the most fun, enjoyable places to go. Now, I will say, I have been to Road America when the weather has been less than perfect, and sort of came away going, oh man, it could get really cold here, or it can get really hot and sticky here. But it's Road America. It's Elkhart Lake. It's beautiful. The track is amazing. I want to talk about driving the track, but Jeff, I think, didn't you grow up in the middle of Turn 5?
Well, I'm pretty close. About 1 hour away from the middle of Turn 5 is where I grew up. So I went there the first time when I was 3 years old. I went to Road America. And the place is amazing. I mean, I love going back. We'll talk about why it's so great, even though it's probably one of the tracks in North America that I've had the least amount of success. Although my favorite win of all time came there. So I love the place.
So what's so spectacular about it is the fact that it is unlike anything else. Over the years, I've met countless European pros who come over here, and we have some really great tracks in this country, and some of them are not small. Watkins Glen is not a small place. Road Atlanta is not a small place, and yet there's something else about Road America and the scale and the scope of the place, and it's not just that it's big. It's not just that front straight is more. It's like 0.8 miles. It's more than 3/4 of a mile long from turn 14 to turn 1. It's not just that like the weather is changeable. I was there one year and it was sunny on the front straight, raining on the middle straight, and snowing on the back straight down in Canada Corner. It's not just that the food is great. It's not just that it's great people. Like there's something special about the place, and you can't put your finger on it, because you put your finger on it, you're like, oh, it's that. And then you start thinking, you're like, no, wait, there's the other 3,000 things about it that I like. So Jeff, so Ross, why somebody went there once with me, and I gave them a ride around the place. It was some track day, and they got out of it. They're like, I stood on the sidelines and I thought it was just a bunch of straights with a corner at the end of it, but there's something else to it. What is it about it as a driver? What do you like about it?
First of all, any track that has a turn called Canada Corner, I'm going to like it.
Why is it called Canada, Ross?
Because it's the corner closest to Canada. That's yeah.
Oh, see, I always heard that the whole reason they named it that was because if you're going fast enough that if you go off there, you'll go so far into the woods that you'll end up in Canada, right?
Well, I almost did that. So I was driving an Indy car. This was when I was driving some uncompetitive Indy cars, and kind of got a last minute call to show up and try to drive and try to qualify this car. And the car was an older car, and I come down, come out of the Carousel, through the Kink, down the back straight, heading to Canada Corner. And an IndyCar at that time, I think we were doing like 192 miles an hour or something like this.
Into
and
Canada?
I go to the brakes, and the car turns completely sideways. And I kind of come off the brakes, the car straightens up, and then I go back to the brakes, the car turns. And I kind of do one of those kinds of things down, shoot off the end, through the gravel trap, the escape road, and relatively gently nose it into the tire wall. And what happened was I got on the brakes, and Jeff explained to me exactly how this works, but the lower control arm front pickup point that went into the gearbox pulled out of the gearbox. And so all of a sudden I had like 6 inches of toe out on the left rear tire.
That's fine. That's totally fine. That's how race cars work.
So yeah, almost ended up back in Canada.
So context for this, like there is Road America is so much more than 3 long straights, but there are 3 big straights. The first one goes from turn 14 to turn 1, and it's uphill, and that's the one it's climbing the entire time. So you can't see turn 1 until you're almost right up on it, and that's the one that's 0.8 miles long or whatever it is. Then there's the middle one that is mostly kind of sort of straight, then it curves in one direction, then it curves to the other direction, then it drops down into turn 5. It's kind of falling off of a cliff, bump, boom. Turn 5's to the left, you go back up again. And then the third straight is the one that Ross was talking about, which is on the back. And it ends in Canada Corner, which is a right-hander and climbs back up the hill. But the thing that got me the first time I was down there, and why listening to what you just said is so bonkers, is that, there's a section of the track, and I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, it's called the Kink. But once you go through that section, it's right at the beginning, right at the kind of sort of beginning of that back straight. Once you go through that, the catch fencing and the trees and the cliffs all just kind of tunnel up, and the straight itself seems narrower. And there's a few feet of grass on each side, and a wall, and the wall wasn't there at one point. The big catch fencing wasn't there at one point. And the whole thing just gets narrower and narrower and narrower until you get to the braking zone, at which point you can kind of see Canada Corner and the spectator areas behind it open up. But it's like you're going through that, and all of a sudden it opens up into nothing but a wall of trees, and it just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And so in the middle of all that, you had a control arm come off.
Yeah. And,
not cool.
And to think about that, what is considered the back straight at Road America?
Yeah.
The only reason we call it a straight is because you keep your foot flat to the floor the entire time.
Right.
But it is far from being straight. And, most long straightaways generally most times start with a relatively slow corner. Well, the back straight at Road America starts with a carousel, which is far from a slow corner. So you're going through this massively fast, big, long carousel sweeper corner. Then you come onto the back straight, I'm saying in air quotes here, that has this I'm trying to think of the right word that I can use here for a family show, the kink, and what you have to get your body and mind around to get through there flat or near flat. And it's one of those things that as you get braver, you think, okay, I'm just going to keep my foot into it. And then in the middle of the corner, your body your foot kind of lifts a little bit. It upsets the car. And now you convinced yourself that you cannot take it flat because you lifted in the middle of a fast corner, upsetting the balance of the car. And you have proven to yourself that you cannot take it flat until you go back the next time or the next time or the next time or the next time. And you make that little lift before the corner and then go back flat and you go through there and go, this is easy. And then you remove that. So yeah. And then you come down and it is a tunnel. You feel like you're driving in a tunnel.
The trees arc over it.
Crazy speed. And then you come down and Canada Corner is, it's not the slowest corner on the track, but it is a corner that massive heavy braking rewards late braking, but you also have to get out of there because there's a good section of fast stuff after that. So it's a really compromise. But as you're coming down there, it's like a tunnel and then it opens up on the right at the very last moment. So you can see where you're going. But there's a point there where you're going, I know the corner goes down there and I know it turns off to the right, but I can't quite see it. So visually it's a challenge. So just that section of the track, I mean, I could go on for another 2 hours just on that section of the track.
Yep. I mean, I think, Russ, you talked about the kink from a driving standpoint. From an engineering standpoint, that's the corner that kind of sets the downforce level. Sam, you talked about Road America being 3 long straightaways. So you would think, trim the car out, low drag, go really fast on the straightaways. The problem is, or the cool thing is, the best straightaways are the ones that aren't straight. That coming out of the carousel is, like you said, Ross, you go through the kink. That's a real corner. I mean, that's not like a kink is probably understating it. It's a right-hand corner. You're doing it at 100 and, depending on the car, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour without lifting. But we'll put enough downforce to make the kink flat. Because if you have to lift in the kink, you're slow all the way down the rest of the straightaway. So that we're telling the driver, make the kink flat. And he's like, okay, it's easy flat. We're like, all right, we're taking downforce out. And then he's like, whoa, this is like really sketchy. And you're like, perfect. That's exactly the way we want it. Because if it's easy flat, you're too slow on these long straightaways that Road America has. So it's challenging for a driver, but it's super challenging for the engineer also because it's that downforce versus drag compromise that's not clear. You go to some tracks, you go to Lime Rock, just pile all the downforce in it. Road America, it's unclear the downforce levels you want to run, and you're asking a lot of the driver.
So this is, and this is where we could spend an entire episode talking about just what the place is like to be on. But I'm curious, when did you each end up there? Because my first experience there, people tell you what it's like. And this is like I said, every European driver, every European pro I've ever met who's come over and looked at the place, they always come back saying it's the only proper circuit in North America, right? The only one that is on the same scale, on the same sense of ballsiness. It's our spa. It's just this big, fast, risky, challenging place. And I thought, okay, cool. Yeah, whatever. And I showed up the first time and I was there for a track day or something. And it was just this casual event. And I showed up. I'm like, oh, cool. I can see most of it. And then we went up to the hill. I'm like, oh, there's the rest of it. And then we went to the hill in the back. And it was like, oh no, there's more of it. And then I looked around. I'm like, this is a lot. And my friend was with me. And he's like, you can't see the parts that you can't see. There's more down the hill. It just keeps going. Like, what was it like? When did you guys first go there? What was it like then?
I'll say I first went when I was 1961. I was 3 years old. Like we said, I grew up an hour from there. My dad was a car guy, liked cars. And so there was it was the June Sprints, I believe. They still had, or they called it the June Sprints. And it was like a big, there really wasn't much pro racing, I don't think. I was only 3, but I remember standing by a Corvette, which was driven by a guy by the name of Dr. Dick Thompson. And
Flying
it was,
dentist, yeah.
yeah,
He was a
And I
dentist, and he was fast.
he was fast. And there was Bob Bondurant was driving, maybe a Shelby. I don't know, maybe a Corvette. I think maybe a Corvette. But there was like the factory Corvette racing team back then. And I was like 3 years old, and I got my picture next to the Corvette. And that's when I first went. And I was like, wow, this is super cool. And it's only an hour away. So, and I've been going back probably every year since then.
It feels so, and I don't know if it's just the trees or the scale or the scope of the place, or the fact that every single bit of it is constantly changing, or the fact that, there's not one concession stand, there's not 5, there's like 3,000 of them, and half of them each do their own take on what, you would think a bratwurst in a bun is a bratwurst in a bun, but half of them do their own take on every single kind of cheese meat product that Wisconsin can spit out. I mean, how do you, when you go back to that place, there's so many places in motorsport and just in the car world in general that I end up back at and I forget are as good as they are. And yet every time I go there, I get geeked about it. I've been more times than I can remember. So, I mean, what do you think of when you think about going back there, and what do you like about going back there? If you could pull down to one thing.
So Sam, the first time I went was in 1982. I was racing in a Formula Atlantic car, and basically me and my brother towed from Vancouver to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, before they had GPS. I don't know how we found the place. We just started driving, drove around Wisconsin, and bumped into it, I think. And we got there and had time to go and do a track walk, which was just amazing. But I remember I remember reading about Brian Redman's cat.
Brian Redman's cat? Like meow? Like cat meow?
Yeah, there was a big story, a myth or something about Brian Redman's cat. And I was hoping that you were going to be able to tell me that story, because I remember we're walking around, and I think somewhere there was in the middle of the carousel, there was like a little, the little cross kind of thing. Like that's where Brian Redman's cat was buried. Somebody listening to this is going to hopefully write in and tell us the story about Brian Redman's cat. But I remember walking it and just, having that experience of this place is massive, all that kind of stuff you talked about. And, having been back many other times since then, I've always been as when I was racing professionally, diet, fitness, health was always like super, super important.
Right. Which in that part of Wisconsin is just like, well, would you like the small piece of cheese or the large piece of cheese?
Well, except that when you go to Road America, you have to eat the brats.
Yeah.
Because, okay, it's not the most healthy thing in the world, but it is Road America. And just that whole experience of brats and corn on the cob and just the park atmosphere, all that stuff. And I think that's what you're getting at, Sam, because I actually want to know, like, what was it that triggered your love for the place?
So like I said, I showed up there first. I was living in Chicago. This was this whole period of my life where I was discovering that I am not cut out to turn wrenches for a living. I was working on European cars very badly, as the people who I did it with will tell you. And I went up there for a track day of some sort. I think the Windy City BMW Club had rented the place. And, you think about it and you think, okay, the local chapter of a car club is renting a racetrack. All right, fine, sure, yeah. That's one thing. And then you get there and the scope and the scale of the place. I mean, have you noticed I've said the word like scale, scope, big, large 20 times already? I just remember walking into the gates and being just staggering at how much it just kept going on. And we showed up at because I was in my 20s and very stupid, we showed up at it was like an 8:30 drivers meeting or whatever it was, or an 8 o'clock drivers meeting, 7:30. And we showed up 5 minutes before it. And then when that was over, I walked up to the concession stand. There used to be this concession stand at the top of the kind of the hill that forms the paddock that was run by one of the local church, St. John the Baptist. And you could walk up there and they would at any time of day serve you a brat and a piece of pie. And it was like 9 o'clock and I was like, hi. And this nice young lady who was probably, hating her summer job because jerks like me show up and want a piece of pie at 9 o'clock in the morning. She looked at me and she goes, hi, what would you like? And I said, I would like can I do a pie and a bratwurst? She was like, why would you not? And she handed me a pie and she handed me a bratwurst. And then 20 minutes later, I went back and got a double brat. And then 20 minutes after that, I went back and got 2 double brats. And then I walked around in this kind of meat stupor the rest of the day. Whenever I got bored, I'd just eat another brat. And I was 24, so, or 26 or whatever it was. So nothing changed about me. I didn't feel bad. I didn't hate life. I do that now. I have one of these things. I become an oily mess. But I remember walking around to different corners, and the trek from that concession stand, which is like probably halfway between turn 14 and turn 1 up the hill, the trek down to turn 5 was like a 20-minute walk, 15-minute walk. At most, it might have been 10. And you get there and your feet hurt and you watch for a bit. And then I thought, well, I'm going to go somewhere else. And I picked a point on the map, and I was dumb enough to pick like turn 3. And it was like an hour later by the time I got there. And all I kept thinking was, this place must be a massive dull bore in anything less than like 3,000 horsepower. But it turns out that when you're there, I mean, you go a lot slower in a Spec Miata than you do in, 600 horses of V8, whatever. But it turns out that when you're there, there's just enough happening, and it's just enough of an interesting and compelling place that it doesn't get boring. You were talking about the Carousel earlier, Ross. Like what? So for people who haven't been there, define what that thing is, because it is a long right-hand downhill, mostly kind of sort of off-camber sweeper. But it's more than that, right? Why is that?
So the Carousel, I think in some ways it captures the rest of Road America. What makes Road America as a driver's track so challenging is it has a little of everything. It has fast corners. It has slow corners. It has kinks. It has off camber. It has on camber. It has corners that you crest a hill at. It has some that have a little compression in them. So, and the Carousel has all of those things as well. Because when you enter the Carousel, there's a little bit of positive camber. And then depending on where the car is positioned, the car kind of drops down a little bit into a bit of a compression. And it can actually start to push out to somewhere where it feels like you're losing camber. And then it comes back again. So there's all of this happening. And it is it's basically 180 degrees. That's
long.
In some cars, you're in 4th, 5th gear.
Yeah.
LMP2 car flat.
What's a P2 car? What's a P2 car tracking through there? Because like the first time I went there was in a bone stock E30 M3, which to put that in perspective, 200 horse, 2,800 pounds on, was it 195s, 205s, whatever it was, and not even a fast car in a straight line by the standards of the period. And I remember going into the Carousel, and it was like somewhere between 80 and 90 miles an hour. And you sit there and you think, okay, this corner is started. And then it's like beat, 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 beat. And then the corner's ended. And that's long. That's a big thing at 80 miles an hour. Like what's a P2 car doing through there?
Jeff, can you remember off the top of your head the G loads and speeds through there? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I don't know G loads, but speeds. I helped develop a little sports racer car that was trying to break the 2-minute lap record there at Road America, and so we were looking. That same team was running an LMP2 car at the same time, so we were comparing the speeds and stuff. LMP2 car back then was probably 120 at the apex, 130 at the apex of the Carousel, and 140 into the Kink. So and it was, that little sports racer, we were 135 in the middle of the Carousel, and it was flat from turn 7 through the Carousel all the way through the Kink to Canada corner in that sports racer. And we were 160 in the middle of the Carousel in a little 1,000-pound D-Sports racer. So that place is fast. I don't know what an IndyCar is through there. I mean, IndyCar has got to be amazing what that thing, what kind of downforce it makes in that. It's a sweeping corner, but it is really fast.
And I think, as drivers, one of the first things all drivers are taught, in slow, out fast. Well, the problem is if you try to drive the Carousel that way, you are just dead slow, period. You have to be fast in, fast out. And for many drivers, when they first go there, there's sort of I'm going to enter this corner. I'm going to anticipate that I'm going to need to slow. So I start to slow. So it's kind of slow is relative, but a lot of drivers slow down too much at the entry to the corner and then try to regain it. The really fast guys, even if they have to do some big speed adjustment, they drive into the corner full throttle until the car tells them you got to do something. Otherwise, we're going to go off the track and crash. So they drive in full throttle, and then the car starts to push. Hopefully, Jeff's done his job and made the car just push a little bit there. And you go, okay, I got to breathe the throttle, bring it back, and now I can go back to power again. That's how you have to drive the carousel, as opposed to the classic approach to a corner of, I'm going to slow down. Now I'm going to accelerate all the way through the corner. That's not how you drive a carousel like that.
Ross, so I got a question for you. I've had drivers tell me that who have done ovals, high speed, like, short oval on Milwaukee or Phoenix or something like that. They almost treat the carousel like a right-hand oval.
Interesting.
Corner.
Really?
Is that
absolutely
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's exactly the same. Oval track, you drive it in hard, collect it in the middle, drive it out hard. And that's the way you got to drive the carousel. And by the way, there are some other tracks that have corners like that. I think Turn 2 at Thunder Hill. I'm trying to think of some other ones off the top of my head right now, but
Turn 5 at Watkins Glen, maybe.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Carousel at Watkins Glen. So big, long, fast corners like that. That's how you drive them. And you can tell the drivers who have sorted that out and those who have not.
I love how much, and you see this even in IndyCar, even talking to IndyCar drivers about it. I love how no matter what you're in, there is always time to think. And for me, having 3,000 voices in my head and being lightly neurotic, that means that somewhere in the straight between turn 4 and 5, I'll be sitting there thinking, did I torque those caliper bolts? Like what's the wind? What is? Do I smell burgers? Like where is that? Oh, it's turn 5 and we're braking now. And then you go down the hill and then you go back up the hill and then there's 6 and 7 and then you get back into that chunk of time after the carousel where like I always come out of the carousel. The carousel flattens. The track goes down and it flattens out and then there's a short kind of curving chute between the carousel and the kink. And I always spend every ounce of that time because you're not doing a lot there, but thinking about what you need to plan and anything I've ever driven. And I mean, the fastest thing I've driven there is, I think it was one of the NASCAR Cup cars or maybe a couple of exotics. But like even then, you still have a beat or two to be like, okay, yeah, there's the kink coming. Going to do a thing in the kink. This is what we need. And 9 times out of 10, I look at the kink and all that goes through my head is it still there? Is the track on the other side of because you go into it. And you can't, all you see is the wall. You see, it's a right-hand turn. It's decreasing radius. It's fast as hell. It's 4th, sometimes 5th gear in road cars. And all you see is that wall, and you know that you have to just squeak it in. And every time it was there, and it never changed. And every time, it's like, people say that about the corkscrew at Laguna, but it's always like, yeah, okay, sure, it's there. But the kink, like, every single time it gives me the squinching willies, and it's just a corner. Like how do you end up coaching people to make speed through there and to not think about it like anything else?
So I'm going to say it's, to Jeff's point, it is, you treat it like an oval track corner. The first time when I went to Indy, to the Speedway to try to qualify for the 500, I think we've talked about this is, Dick Simon gave me the advice of, don't turn into turn 1 thinking you're going to do it flat and then try to fix it. Lift off back at the start-finish line and then go to full power before the corner. And so when I went back to driving Road America after being at Indy, that's the way I approached the kink. And that's the way I approach coaching the kink. And I don't care whether you're driving a spec Miata or an Indy car or anything in between. You could be on sticky tires, you can be on non-sticky tires. You have to do something there. Even if you're flat, you have to make the commitment to flat. But a lot of cars are maybe on new tires are flat, but as the tires start to go off, then it's not quite flat. So again, you approach it the same way. How I coach somebody to do the kink well is make your speed adjustment before the corner and then put your foot down flat to the floor at the point you turn into the corner, into the kink. And that way you're building the habit, the mental program for being flat to the floor. And when you are full throttle through there, the car is better balanced, it's stuck better, and you go through there and you go, I can do this. But if you come in there thinking, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to go, it's almost the opposite of the carousel. You don't want to drive it into the kink and then make your adjustment, because that just upsets the car, and the car says, I don't like what you're doing to me, stop it, or I'll put you into the wall. So that's how you approach learning how to go fast at the kink.
Well, I love the core of what you're talking about there is the notion of belief, right? And I love how that place makes you think about what you're doing and forces you to concentrate and make a plan and to stick to it, no matter who you are, because it's so big and there's so much. I mean, I looked up a couple of days ago, I was curious, and I looked up what the track records for various things were. And at one point, I don't know if it still stands, but at one point, the all-time lap record was Dario Franchitti in a Turbo Champ car of some flavor, and it was an average of like 145 miles an hour over a lap, which, Jeff, I mean, what is that? That's got to be, is that high minute to low twos? What does that work out to?
Well, think about, I remember when Mark Donohue broke the 2-minute barrier. I know the sound barrier was important to the world, but the 2-minute barrier at Road America was a thing.
Yeah.
And when he broke that in the 91730, people went, oh my God, 1,100 horsepower and these big giant tires and all this downforce. That's amazing. He broke 2 minutes.
This is the 70s Can-Am. Yeah, right?
Yeah, 70s Can-Am. Now a good GT3, spec homologated GT3 on the current tire is only about 4 seconds off of that. A GT3 car, which is closely related to a street car. A LMP3 car breaks 2 minutes. An LMP2 car is 6 seconds under that. God. That little D Sports racer I talked about was 300 horsepower, 1,000 pounds, and went 152.
52.
8 seconds faster than a car with 1,100 horsepower, and this one had 300.
God.
And so Indy cars are like 145s now.
Man.
Or even quicker. So, I mean, it is incredible. That track, you talk about 4 miles long. It's long, and it's the scale and the massive of the track. Man, you go there with a LMP2 car or anything quicker, and you're like, yeah, this thing happens. It's coming. This is not a long track anymore. It has shrunk tremendously.
And Jeff, I the one thing that that's I believe makes Road America more challenging than a lot of other tracks is you do have a little bit of time to think. Sam, you mentioned you come out of the carousel and you've got a moment, and again, it's all relative.
Yeah.
But you have that moment where you can think, and generally you come out of the carousel and go, damn, I could have done that better. Oh, but I better get my attention up on that kink. If you're driving, no matter what you're driving, you come out of turn 14 and you're driving up that hill up the front straightaway and you're going, if you're in a spec Miata or an Indy car, you're going, la-di-da-di-da, what are we doing now?
Right.
And that's why it is so difficult to put a lap together at Road America, because you have too much time to think in places, and then it's like, oh my God, I don't have enough time to think.
That straight in particular is so, you come out of 14 and the pavement's level, and then it just kind of ramps up. It's like the inverse of a ski hill, and it levels up near, there's a bridge, or there's a flag bridge at start finish, but it levels up near there, but it's always climbing. And I remember, I ran there I famously, ignominiously ran there in an ITB car. It was one of my first club races. And this is a terrible story in itself, because I ended up blowing the brakes into 5, going into the runoff a little, and I had been in the back of the pack to begin with, but then I spent the rest of the race driving around by myself in like a 30-car field that I never saw, because by that point, they were like two corners ahead of me, and the place is big enough, and the way the hills work, you can just be like, oh yeah, doodle, 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 and do your entire lap, and if you lose the field, they're gone. And it's just, I remember going up that front straight hill, and that car had a a legal motor that in no way made anything like the power it should have. And I remember going up that hill and watching, like, you go, nah, and then watching the tack drop back at the peak of the hill because it couldn't quite pull up the hill. The car went from like 90 something to 80 something to 80, and it's just ticking backwards and backwards and backwards. And it's just the notion of you're constantly reminded of where you are and how big it is. And Peter Egan wrote about this several years ago. He said it was something like, the great thing about it was that you do a lap at the place and you feel like you have been somewhere. Like, and that's so common to the great tracks, the great, experiences in my life. They've all been very much singular, right? They are of themselves. There's nothing like them. But
Yep. You talked about that hill, Sam. That hill, for me as a race engineer, means, you think it's just a hill, it's a straightaway. That hill was probably my biggest fear in 2018. I was running a LMP2 car, and that was before they split the classes. So it was in the overall IMSA class against all the DPIs, and, it was just DPI, and you could enter an LMP2 car in that class. So we were going for the overall win. And long story short, it was a fuel mileage race. Like Road America often turns out to be in anything. IndyCar, it's always a fuel mileage race. IMSA, it's always a fuel mileage race because the lap's so long that if you can save a little bit of fuel, you might be able to get another lap out of it. So anyway, turned out to be a fuel mileage race, and we're saving. And it's the core LMP2 car. Colin is driving it, and we're saving fuel for nearly an hour. We started saving really early, an hour.
Which in Road America is like 2 laps, but go on. Yes.
Right. Right. So we're saving. Nobody thought we could make it. We were going to be 5th if we just ran against those guys. So we're like rolling the dice. Who cares? 5th. If it doesn't work, we'll be 8th. If we run normal, we're going to be 5th. So let's try to win this thing. We're going 4 laps from the end. It's like, we can probably make this. And Colin's running almost 10 seconds off the pace. I mean, he's lifting at the Sargento Bridge going into turn 5 on the back straightaway.
Halfway down. Wow.
Exactly.
Man,
he's
like
lifting
halfway down the straight.
Exactly. And coasting all the way in. And he's running, a good time was a 54, and he's running 202s, way off the pace. But everybody else had to make a pit stop, and we didn't. And they're catching us. The hill thing is, okay, we got this, I think. We got to pull up the hill. If it stumbles at the bottom of the hill, we don't get to the top. We can't coast to the finish line out of turn 14. And that became the key element in, do we have enough fuel to get up the hill? Can we get up the hill? I hope we can get up the hill. And turned out we did, and we won the race.
I think I can.
That hill was like, I never thought it was that important until then. I was like, it's just a hill. And no, that was like the crux moment to win that thing. Get up the hill.
This, by the way, is why I love doing this show with you guys, because on the one hand, you have me who's talking about my first year in club racing 20 years ago, where I blew the brakes and then drove around by myself in a car that was underpowered. And also, I got scared. And you're like, well, this one time when something P2 going for the win with my champion son. And I'm just like, I'm not a real boy. But okay, so we've talked a bunch about the track, and there's so much to talk about with the track itself. But I'm really curious what, like, half of the reason I love going there is the culture and the experience you get from just the sheer, just dense dump of Wisconsin that gets thrown in your face every time you're there. Like, the great thing about that place with regard to the people, and there's 1,000 of them, but the king thing for me is that it doesn't matter what it is. Could be the June sprints, could be the, when the runoffs were there, it could be an IMSA race, it could be like 5 kids on a bicycle, all on the same bicycle riding in circles in the paddock, and half of Wisconsin would show up to watch it. Like the stands fill, the parking lots fill, even when IndyCar was drawing like fractional crowds, and you could see on the speedways like 5 or 8 years ago that on TV that there was nobody there. People still showed up at Road America, and it is it is just this magical, wonderful place. Like you go to yard sales in the counties 5 or 6 counties away, and you see like AAR stickers and, patches from, Foyt's yada yada in 1970 something, and Andretti this or that or the other, or, it's race car parts sitting on the table in front of some suburban house. And somebody's like, oh, well, we've got these LPs and here's this Barry Gibb CD. And also, would you like a set of worn out Penske's? And that stuff is just so embedded in the culture. What else? Like when you guys go there, when you're there for some pro weekend, do you have any time to just kind of screw around in the rest of it? Because it's so great.
Sam, if you'd asked me that question early on in my career of going there, I would have said no. Like, I know the track. But I have to say that through the years, I've learned to appreciate the atmosphere of the area way more. Yeah. And there was a bunch of years ago when I was coaching IMSA, and I would make a point of spending a day before or after every track that I went to. And I called it my year of hiking across America, one racetrack at a time. Because I do a hike.
That's amazing.
The day before or the day after. Yeah.
What made you do this? What kicked it off? Was you just like woke up one day and was like, Ross needs more culture?
No, that's never going to happen. But I enjoy hiking, and this was just a way for me to take advantage of the fact that I'm going to some places. The number of years, Jeff, I'm sure the same thing. People go, oh, you get to go to there, you get to go there, you get to go there. And you go, I know where the airport is, I know where the track is, and I know where the hotel is. I don't know anything else about it. And, so I just started doing that. And, I remember, hiking in Austin when I was at Coda, and, going to do the Appalachian Trail when I was coaching at Lime Rock that year. So that year I spent some time hiking in the area. But I really started to take some more time to appreciate, the little town of Elkhart Lake. Yeah. It is magical. It is something like, I remember the first time going there going, is this a Disneyland thing? Like, has Disney built this little town? Because it's too perfect. Yeah. And you go into, is it Geppert's Ice Cream? Geppert's, is that the name of the ice cream shop? Yeah. I mean, it's like something out of the, I don't know, 40s or whatever. Like, it's out of a movie scene. It's not real.
And you realize after a while, you think it's all just put on, but it's not, right?
No.
The vintage races during the summer, they drive the race cars into town. The track is 2 miles from town. There's this little state highway that runs into town. And it's called Elkhart Lake because the town itself is at the base of this long lake. It was a vacation destination for a long time. The railroad ended up there. People from Milwaukee and Chicago and St. Louis would end up there in the summers. But you go down there and they have this race car parade during the vintage races in the summer where they all go through town and then they park on the main streets in town. And there are car shows, and it is throngs of people, so thick you can't see the pavement on the 4 or 5 blocks of this little downtown core of this village. And all the restaurants are jammed, and the trees are all blooming, and there's a bunch of shade, and there's bands that pipe up, and there's ice cream, and there's what is possibly the single greatest bar in the history of time at the core of all of it. And you go in there, and you have your glass of spotted cow, and you walk outside, and it is summer in America in a movie in the 1950s, except it's now, and it's not the 1950s, and everything about it is great. And it's so idyllic and yet weird, and yet in no way is it a put on. It's just organic and how it developed, right?
I mean, even Paul Newman liked it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
everybody likes
classic
right.
Scene from Winning. I mean, that was right. I think it was Shirley Siebken's bar that he was coming out of or into or whatever, right? I mean, everybody goes there. I think what's weird or interesting is you guys describe it in this atmosphere and and to me it's just like, I don't get that. It's like home. I grew up an hour from there. The town I grew up in had the same 4 bars on the same corner in the same atmosphere, it the same people, and we ate the same cheese, and it was just
everyone eating
like
the same cheese.
Get to go home. I mean, that isn't to downgrade it. It's to realize how lucky I was to grow up in that kind of, in that area, in that atmosphere. It's like, because you guys are like, oh, that's amazing. I'm like, yeah, it's where I grew up. It is amazing. Holy moly, it is really amazing.
Everybody from there And that's the thing, right? There are people who grew up in the surrounding counties who have only ever raced at, one, maybe two tracks, that and Blackhawk, which is,
Right.
club track about 40 minutes away or whatever it is. But everybody there feels like it's theirs. And that's, I don't know if that's rooted in the whole, they sell shares in the Green Bay Packers and they sell shares in Road America. But everybody seems to look at it as like, this is ours, welcome, come in. Even
Yes.
down to that bar, Siebken's. I remember the first time I walked in Siebken's, which is, it's the bar at the base of this the lodge itself, I think, is Victorian era, but it's been remodeled a couple of times. But it's in this ancient building. You kind of not a sub basement, but it's a couple steps down from the street, and it's dark even in the middle of the day, and it's all this brown wood, and there are stickers. It's like any other racing bar you could think of, except it's as organic and authentic and real as you get, right? Stickers and bunting and flags and all this stuff hanging from the ceiling. And I looked up and I saw, champ car and kart stickers and like ARCA things and just all this random road racing stuff. And I remember the first time I was in there, I saw a sticker on the ceiling from one of my friend's club racing teams, like 2 inches away from, something that said Andretti on it and clearly been there since the dawn of time. And I was like, you could just put a sticker on the wall. They don't care, because they don't. But you just know not to be a jerk about it, because it's Wisconsin, because everybody's nice and they're not jerks. Why would you be a jerk? It's so great.
I quick story here. Not the first time. Yeah, it was actually the first time I went to drive an Indy car at Road America.
Yeah.
It was a last minute call. Dale Coyne calls me like on a Wednesday and said, "Get to Road America. You're going to drive this weekend."
He calls me on Tuesday and says, whatever you're doing, don't go to Road America.
Yeah.
Go
yeah.
on.
Don't.
Yes.
So I get this hotel in Sheboygan, which, by the way, is just a great name to say. Sheboygan.
Like
it is just
towns in Wisconsin are. They're great.
it's just fun to say. Anyways, so I get this little motel in Sheboygan, and it's one of these places. This would have been, early 90s. You walk in and they give you a big brass key with one of those green plastic fobs on it. Like, this is the same key that was used in 1953 when the place opened.
Right.
I walk down the hall, and this is maybe 9:00 at night by the time I've left the track and got there. And I go down the hall, open up, and I walk in and go, oh, I'm not taking my shoes off. Somebody's done an oil change and a murder at the same time on the carpet in this place. And, I go to get into bed. I pull the covers back, and 2 earwigs run across the pillow.
It's fine. That's
And I'm
simple.
flicking them out of the way and then crawling to bed. I wore my clothes to bed. And this was just like the most horrible experience. The next year I go back, and the team that I'm with, I can't remember how this all worked, but I'm now staying at the Kohler, the American Club in Kohler, which is like a 4 or 5 star resort. Just
If that name sounds familiar, if it sounds like you've heard it before, it's because it's probably on your faucets, because the
Right.
Kohler is that Kohler, like the toilet and the faucet and the sink, and there's Kohler,
And by the way-
Wisconsin. Very close.
By the way, Kohler, you need to go and visit Kohler, because it is a company town, and it is weird because you drive around and you go,
Never been.
every house, every lawn is perfect. It's like the Kohler factory people say, you must mow your lawn every second day at 2:00 in the afternoon. And if the grass is more than 1/8 longer than it's supposed to be, you get kicked out of the town. Like, it's kind of weird, but in a way it's
We're the people who
cute.
make your toilets flush. Don't make us mad.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started going there. It's funny. You can talk to people about Road America, and it's like any other place that everybody loves and you go to, even though it never changes, because it still does kind of change. You can talk about the changes. Like, I remember the first time I went to New York City being like, oh, cool, this is what it looks like. And then the second time I went, a year or two later, looking around, I was like, wait, it looks different, but it's the same. But everything's in a different, it's like everything had shifted 5 degrees. And Road America's like, there's something similar about it, because there's the age of, when the pagoda was there on the front straight. There's when St. John the Baptist was there, when the paddock looked like this, looked like that. Like, they always they constantly screw with it and improve it, pave this, move this around, and paddock. And yet at the same time, it's always the same, and it doesn't matter. Like, when What did it look like when you guys first went there? Because there are pictures from, I know you're not this old, but from the 50s where it is literally just a road through the trees. And then even when they were running turbo champ cars in the 90s, like it wasn't the kind of place you imagine, like, you know, Foyt going into a corner at $1.80 or whatever, right?
I have a story that tells what it looked like back then. If anybody's listening, been to Road America, you know the main gate where you come in off of 67, I think it is, and you come in the main gate, you go under the tunnel between turns. It used to be a bridge, but between 13 and 14, basically,
yeah.
Right? You go under there. Well, if you're going into the track, to the left of that is another gate. You actually get to that gate first before you get to the gate coming in. I'm 6 years old. That gate is still there, by the way. And I don't think that gate, I think it's the same chain link that was back there when I was 6 years old. This other alternate gate. And so I'm 6 years old. My dad, myself, and a friend of my dad's who was Uncle Boom Boom was his name.
Wait, that
probably
was,
not
that
his.
was, I'm sorry, Uncle Boom Boom?
Uncle Boom Boom. I don't think that was
Italian?
his given name.
Was he in La Cosa Nostra? Like, what did it mean? What did
He was a
break
bookie
legs for a living?
He was a bookie who from Milwaukee. Who, you know, back in the day, you actually went to your bookie and you booked your Packers bets and your football bets, and he wrote them on pieces of paper. Ultimately went to jail because he was being chased by the police one day in Milwaukee. He's a good friend of my dad's.
I'm gonna laugh.
Was being chased by the police. It was raining out. The police turned their lights on because they're going to arrest Uncle Boom Boom and put him in jail for being a bookie. So he gets rid of the evidence by taking his bookie slips and throws them out the window. And they all stick to the windscreen of the police car. So he basically threw all of his bookie slips into the, gave them to the police, and they took him away and arrested him. I don't know what happened to Uncle Boom Boom after that. But me and my dad has a Corvette 60, pretty current, whatever it was. This was have been 64, 65. So he had a 63 or 64 Corvette Stingray.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm a little kid. I can sit in the back in the parcel shelf or whatever it is back there. There's no really seats. Uncle Boom Boom in the passenger seat, my dad driving. We're leaving the racetrack. The race is over. We're in this long line to everybody to get out of this gate. And to the right is this gate I'm talking about, this alternate gate. It's chain shut. And Uncle Boom Boom's like, we should open that gate. And my dad's like, you can't open that gate. It's chain shut. And he goes, just a minute. And he flings the door open. And there's this pole where the chain link gate swings back against, so they can tie it open. It's like a 1-inch pipe stuck in the ground. And Uncle Boom Boom just starts yanking this pipe out of the ground. He frees it from the ground, walks up to the chain, to the locks, sticks it in there, twists it, and yanks it. Uncle Boom Boom's a big guy. And
you don't say. Never would have guessed.
And he busts open the chain, swings the gates open. As he's running back, there's people honking their horn and cheering for him like he's the superstar of the whole weekend. And everybody starts diverting out of that gate. So every time I drive into Road America, I look at that gate now. I'm looking for the pole that he yanked out of there. But the gate is the same gate. I think they replaced the chain with an unbroken chain. But that, to me, is the Uncle Boom Boom gate. I could never go there without thinking about that.
I'm never going to see the place again.
And Jeff, a few years ago, the team I was with, the drivers and team owner had a motorhome, RV, and it's parked in the track. And for whatever, I forget exactly what it was, but their flight got in late or whatever, their RV is there. They roll up to Road America at 11 o'clock at night, and they're trying to get in. And of course, the gates are closed. They got through that exact same gate. I don't know how they did, but I remember them saying they went to that gate just off to that side over there.
Yep.
And somehow got it open. So maybe Uncle Boom Boom is teaching lessons.
I think maybe. What we need to do is I need to get a sign, the Uncle Boom Boom gate, and just like tie wrap it to that gate or something like that.
Yeah. Boom Boom, boom boomed here before he boom boomed himself into jail.
Right.
I love how that place, there you talk about gates, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, that gate, and then there's the other gate on the west side, the gate in the east, and then this gate. Like the number of features, number of bridges. We were talking about the bridge that used to be into the paddock, over, it was the Billy Mitchell Bridge, over the track on, what was it, on the you drive in, and then there's like 50 yards over that way. And I remember going up, the first time I went up under it, it was another one of those track landmarks. You're like, is it going to be there? You come up out of Canada Corner, and that bridge is there. And the right line through the quick line through the corner in most things involves like, well, okay, there's the bridge abutment, and you're like right up on it sometimes, but maybe you're not, but it feels like you're up on it. You can't see up the hill, and it's blind, and you go through it, and then you're like, okay, we did it. Whoosh, whoosh, thread the needle, and then the next lap, it's still there. You're like, is the track on the other side of the bridge? I don't know. And the funny thing is, like, that place, that chunk of the pavement was so much, what I was talking about earlier, like that was so much that thing, that road, that was one piece of the Road America experience. They took the bridge down. It's now just some kind of like pieces of land on each side, and it's gone. And I thought, oh God, they ruined Road America. Except they didn't. The first time I came back after, it was like, oh yeah, it's just Road America without the bridge. It's still great, and you could still go off in the backside of the paddock and get lost in the trees. And there's 300 other gates and 300 other bridges, and it just keeps going and going and going. It's like, here's your private little America and a state park, and oh look, that it's like, that chunk at Road Atlanta that's down in the middle of the paddock where it's just like that little ravine with the forest. It might be, I don't know, maybe 100 yards by 100 yards. It's like, take that, and that's every bit of the Road America grounds. It just keeps booming on. I love it.
Sam, can I share one of my favorite driving tips for Road America?
No, Ross Bentley, don't tell me about driving. I won't listen.
Okay. First of all, eat at least 2 brats and 1 corn on the cob. No. Turn 14. The classic advice is the most important corner on the track is the one that leads on the longest straightaway. So you could make the argument that turn 14 is the longest, or is the most important corner on that track. So the classic advice for that corner is slow in, fast out. But it's still a relatively, Jeff, to me, I call it a medium speed corner. It's not a slow corner. It's definitely a medium speed corner. And it's very easy to overslow for that corner. And then, I don't know about you, but I would rather start accelerating from 65 miles an hour than I would from 63 miles an hour. So the speed you carry through that corner is really important as well. The key to that corner is when you come up to it, you turn your head and you look to the inside of the apex curbing. You look at the grass inside the apex curbing. Because most drivers, what they do is they look at the apex curbing, and that's kind of their target for, that's the line they want to be on. If you're driving a car quickly and you aim for the apex curbing, you will be at least 1 to 2 feet wide of it. And that impacts when you get back to power. If you aim for the grass, you will never get there. Again, if you're carrying good speed. So the trick is carry enough speed, look and aim for the grass, drive the car, try to get to the grass, and the car will never get there, but your inside tires will just run over the apex curbing and you'll get a good launch out of there. You'll end up carrying good speed and get back to power early. So that's one of my secrets to going fast at Road America.
That is deeply useful, and the kind of thing that I probably wouldn't have never would have thought of. And also, unfortunately, it's the kind of thing that I will never, ever remember. But that's half the problem with that place, is that I end up getting to like turn 6. And by that point, you've covered 1,000 miles of racetrack since start finish. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, I made a note to myself to do something different in 7 last time. What was it? And then 7's gone. It's like, oh cool, what was I going to do differently? No, screwed that up. And it's this whole mental game of trying to remember what's the title of the John McPhee book? A Sense of Where You Are. Like trying to keep a sense of where you are at all times while also running a damn race. It's
So I have a question for both of you guys. With the classic track and all that, is anybody just a little bit sad that whoever's run the place in the last 5 or 6 years keeps paving the exit curbs wider and wider? I mean, turn 5, you can drive the thing to, Sheboygan and still be on the racetrack.
And there's those those gator strips on the edge, those rad, like big fall off curbs that now you can almost straddle, right?
They're nothing.
Yeah.
You drive outside of those.
Yeah.
And Road America seems like a track where turn one is paved so wide. We saw Indy cars flying there, sports cars. Every year it's a problem with track limits and they pay. So they dip a wheel in turn 14, so they put more asphalt. Then they dip a wheel off of that, they put more asphalt. Canada Corner now, you can go off Canada Corner and you can go as far off, you can go 6 car lengths widths off and come back on. I don't know. It just bugs me a little bit.
I mean, how do you solve a problem like myriad track limits? I mean, that's a problem everywhere, right? I mean, how is it worse? And I'm asking because I don't know. Is it if it is a problem everywhere, is it as bad at Road America as it is anywhere else? Worse? Better? I mean, where does it sit on the curve?
So I think the track limit topic is a topic for another podcast because, man, that is a big one. And I have some opinions. Let's just put it that way, okay? And
Me too.
To your point, Sam, to your question, I think I'm going to say, yes, Jeff, I agree with you that there's too much out there and they keep adding more and more. But I'd say Road America is not as bad as some other places.
I agree.
COTA
100%.
is, COTA is probably the worst because it's a Formula One track. But I think, the whole thing on track limits, man, don't get me started.
Well, and I guess
today.
I mean,
sorry,
go ahead, Jeff.
I should have not. I didn't really mean to bring track limits up, but even if there weren't track limits, if that asphalt's there, turn 5 is a way different corner now than it was 15 years ago. And the way you approach it and the way you set up for it and all of that, they've changed the track, which is, I don't know. I'm an old guy and I wish they wouldn't have.
And the reason is because it's there, race drivers will use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even if it's not quite there, they'll still use it. Take it away and they won't use it.
Well, I don't know. I think what we keep orbiting, right, is the notion that, and what hits me for me with this place, and maybe the reason that we've been talking about it and we all care about it so much, there's this deeply American notion of if you have a little bit of something, well, a lot must be better. And if you have a lot of something, well, a lot of that something must be even better. And 10 times that must be 10 times better. We expand into, everything from stuffed crust pizza and put cheese where it doesn't belong to, putting racetracks where there aren't supposed to be racetracks. Like, I don't know, track stops and then the track keeps going and all of a sudden what was grass is now paved, right? But there is something interesting about that place and the scale of it. And I think what's so compelling about it is that it is big without being too big. It is of itself without insisting on all of the things that it does well. It's just kind of there, and if you don't notice them, you miss them. It takes attention to appreciate, and when you do, it gets deeper. It's like an early episode of The Simpsons. Like the more attention you pay, the more you get back. And yet on top of that, there's still just this. At the end of the day, if you just want to go to a racetrack and hang out and eat some cheese until your eyes turn yellow, you can. And it is simple and engaging on a level that doesn't require you to think about. But the more you think about it, the better it gets. And we should probably wrap this up because we're about run out of time. But I'm curious, what is it? What is it like when you have an awful weekend there? And I ask this for a reason, because personally speaking, I've never had a good race weekend at Road America. I've never even had a good track day weekend at Road America where on paper, right, where something didn't break, where the weather didn't go to ass and everybody was miserable, where it wasn't 3 billion degrees below zero or 4 billion degrees above it. And yet every single one of those weekends was great. And I always look back at it. I was excited to go again, and it doesn't matter. And I'm curious, does that change when it turns into your job? Because it's one thing when you're just going there screwing around like a private citizen, but if you're actually working there, does it change how you feel about the place?
For me, there are tracks where I've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, going back to there.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever felt like, just going back to Road America. Every time I go to Road America, it feels good. And I've won there. And I've had some really, really bad experiences there. I mentioned one earlier. I mentioned one where I went to drive in a endurance race there, showed up, and by the time I got there on the Friday, they said, the car is broken. It's not going to run this weekend. You can go home. And so guess what we did? Me and co-driver, we went to Geppert's and had ice cream. So, there's always something good about Road America.
Yeah.
Jeff?
For me, it's an unfair question because I have my brother still lives an hour away, his family, his kids, his grandkids, my friends, the people that taught us most about go-kart racing, that family still lives there. So for me, I go there to catch up with family and friends, and then I get to go to America. It's like, wow, this is like the double whammy. You get super great racetrack and my friends and everything. So hard to have a bad weekend.
Okay. All right.
What about you, Sam?
Does it change when I go there for work? Oh, interesting. I've actually been there for work. Good question. It doesn't. It just becomes a really, we only used it a few times in my career just because you are renting 640 acres of earth. It is so expensive. I think, hell, man, 20 years ago, it might have been 20 or 30 grand a day to rent. I don't know what it is now, but I've been there a few times for work, and it always just kind of turns into just another place you're doing the job until you stop and have those moments where you look around and go, oh, right, this is where I am. Or at the end of the day, you're with a couple of people you work with in one of your favorite bars on earth, and somebody rings the stupid Jägermeister bell, and you have to drink the Jägermeister, and it's just, I hate Jägermeister, but it doesn't matter. I like Jägermeister, and I'm Road America. And then you drive home, and I lived in Chicago for years, and Chicago and Milwaukee, Road America is close enough. A friend of mine, my friend Colin, lives in Milwaukee and famously has a record time from downtown Milwaukee to Road America that I won't repeat on air because it's clearly very illegal. But you can be there in, I don't know, I want to say it's like an hour 15, whatever it is, from Milwaukee. From Chicago, it's a couple hours. It's an easy drive to the point where sometimes we drive up in the morning and then drive back and be back for dinner, or drive back around dinner time and have a late dinner and be in time for it. But I remember just every single time we leave feeling like it's I just went someplace. I did something that matters, even if only to me. And then, you blink and you're back in Milwaukee by the lake, and you blink again, you're sitting on the Kennedy Tollway in Chicago, and you're back outside in the real world from this land of dairy farms and, wonderful, wonderful sunsets and green fields, and everybody's very nice, and the gift shop has neat things in it that I always buy too many of. And it never seems real. And every single time I go back there, it reminds me that it exists and reminds me why I love it. And I don't know, we only get so many things like that, right? And that's part of why it's so magical, because I can think of what can you guys think of other racetracks that feel like that? I know for me, Laguna feels like that. Lime Rock feels like that. Goodwood feels like that. I'm told Spa feels like that, but that's not all of them. That's what's so great about it. That it's special, right?
Yeah, it's the old school classic racetracks. And you named off a really good list, and everybody has their special one, but it's, Mossport is another it's a small Road America, but it's still, they've maintained the aura and the specialness of that track for years and years and years. And so there's still some really good tracks like that. Road America just seems to be, the biggest, the most spectacular of those tracks in North America. But there's luckily they're not all like COTA. We have Road America, we have Mossport, we have, you pick it. Watkins Glen is the same kind of a track. Those are iconic tracks, and Road America might just be the king of the North American tracks like that.
So I love racetracks that have character, and Road America has huge amount of character. Laguna Seca has the same kind of, Sebring has that. the difference between, let's say, the difference between Sebring and Road America, like I find the challenge of driving Sebring and Road America very similar. The difference is, at the end of the day, I can appreciate Elkhart Lake. And sorry if you live in Sebring, Florida, but I can't appreciate strip malls.
It's okay.
Sebring.
Sebring
sorry,
has its own oddball charm. You're there and you're like, do I need a tattoo on my face? Maybe I do. I'm not sure.
Right.
I could get one if I needed it, though.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean,
but I think that's part of it. And, Sam, you kind of asked the question of, do you sort of still appreciate it and all that kind of stuff? And I'm going to say there was a period in my career as a professional in the sport where it was another track. And I would go to the track and I knew where the track was. I knew where my hotel was. I'm going to say in the last, number of years, I've deliberately taken a little time to sit back and appreciate it. And yeah, if you're listening to this, maybe sometimes when you go to a track, and I don't care if it's Sebring or Road America or Coda, there's something to appreciate around the place that makes it all special as well.
Yeah. I think one more thing I'll say that I think we've been orbiting. All we do is orbit stuff, Sam. Man, Space Sam. One of the things that I think is just core to all of this, we as people we're drawn towards stuff that feels like it comes somewhere, where the origin, what it means, and that applies to houses, that applies to people, that applies to stories or instruments or books or anything that feels like it came from somewhere. And you mentioned Coda, right? Like Coda is great in so many ways, but it's also a big, long, kind of anonymous racetrack. And, there are club tracks that are like, well, we're the longest with the most corners and the yada, yada. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, that's just a number. It doesn't mean anything. Big is not necessarily good. Having a story and meaning something while being big is real. But on that note, we are about out of time. So that's been Road America. Tune in next week when our topic will be, what's it going to be? It's Ross and Jeff talking about that time in the 1930s that they each got jobs as archaeology professors. But one day they go into the jungle and they have these whips and these fedoras. They're in this giant cave and they find this biblical artifact. But, it's very important. And then some Nazis come along and there's a big fight over it and some faces melt. But everyone, they raided all the arks and it was a good story. So that's been our show. See you next time. Thanks for listening.
Have fun.
Yeah.